This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
And welcome to the latest, the freshest edition of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company. I'm your host, Vito Jerome Chirco, alongside my usual sidekick and partner in crime, that is the Doc from the Detroit Sports Podcast Network, and specifically of the Doc and Jock premier podcast under the umbrella of the DSP Network. That is John Macaroon on this lovely Valentine's Day in Michigan. John, how are you doing?
Where's my present?
I know I didn't deliver anything. Well, you're not my Valentine this year. Well, nobody truly is, besides for my mom. Right? That's the right thing to say, correct?
See, Vito, you know how you are. I had specifically told you when I was going to pick you up because you are asking me for a ride to the Sterling Heights studio. I said specifically, if I'm going to give you a ride, I'm not going to ask you for gas money because I don't need that. I said, you're buying the bagels. So we go to the bagel shop, we get our orders, we start talking gossip, we start talking about the news and notes regarding Detroit sports, and I order my food, order the coffee, and I go to pay. Where's Vito? 10 miles behind me.
I was in the bathroom. No, I was way out of the,
Did you not notice I was going into my pockets very slowly, trying to kind of get into my debit card? Not once did Vito go, hey, I got this. Not once,
man. You were
man.
trying to sway me to pay for you.
That was
that was part of the plan. Oh, I forgot. It just slipped my mind this morning on lovely Valentine's Day once again. By the way, when I say Valentine's Day, I like saying actually V's Day. It's V's Day, and I am the Big V, Big Vito Jerome Chirco of this very fine podcast that is Tigers Talk. And we are here for episode number 78 this week, Doc. And spring training has begun, and that's always a good sign of things to come. Well, has been for the most part recently in Tigers, history, but this season is suspect. We don't know what to totally expect, and a lot of people are down on the Tigers going into this year's spring training that is in Lakeland, Florida. Beautiful Lakeland, Florida, where Anthony Fennick, all these Tigers beat writers are, and pitchers and catchers reported on Monday of this week. And the first official workout is on the day of this recording, Tuesday of this week, for the pitchers and catchers. So, with all that being said, we have a lot of, just stuff to project regarding the Tigers, And before all that, though, we have a big note to discuss, and that is Mike Ilitch, the owner of the Tigers, longtime owner of the Tigers, passing away at the age of 87. And Mr. I had owned the Tigers since 1992 for a long, long time, saw a lot of bad baseball at first. He was instrumental in getting Kirk Gibson to return to Motown, I believe in 93, the year of my birth, once again. And I know I've said that many times on this podcast. Anyways, though, very instrumental in, getting Dave Dombrowski here. Then Dombrowski was the right man to lead the ship, to guide that team in the right direction. And he, had to deal with a lot of losing, though, at first throughout the 90s. One of the most losing, ball clubs in Major League Baseball during the 90s, the Tigers were. And also, in the early 2000s, they were a miserable ball club until 2006, but he was instrumental, Ilitch that is, in getting Dave D in place as a team president, as a team general manager, and Dave Dombrowski got Jim Leland, and everything really worked out after that, starting with the 2006 campaign, which he was the owner of the Tigers then, and up until his death this year, Doc.
Now, Vito, we got to remember, up until the point where he bought the Tigers, he was the Red Wings owner for about 10 or 11 years, and then he just had to, once he realized that the Tigers were going to be up for sale, from his rival, the pizza conglomerates got together and had a meeting. Mr. Moynihan came out and had the Tigers for sale, and Mr. Ilitch was able to purchase it. Knowing that he was a minor league baseball player in the Tigers organization, it just didn't work out because he had a series of injuries. He just really wasn't all that talented. And the learning point from the story is he had a backup plan. If his Major League Baseball career was not going to pan out, he had a plan in place to start Little Caesars, and I learned that the first Little Caesars was established in Garden City, and over 7,000 franchises later, he's built an empire. But to talk about the Tigers, yeah, man, do you remember, I think you were younger, do you remember the losing seasons with Brandon Inge, with Bobby Higginson, with the myriad of managers that just came through that were terrible prior to Jim Leland? It was really a tough time, and at that time, Vito, many reporters people that were covering the Tigers, that were watching, had really thought that it was a lost generation because the Tigers were awful. And that was a generation of bad baseball. And many people felt like, if the losing was going to continue, that there was a chance it wasn't going to come back. And Mr. Ilitch definitely, with the acquisition of Pudge Rodriguez, turned it around. But it was really in question if the Tigers fan base was going to be there because you had seasons, and I remember specifically it hurt so bad to lose 119 games in a major league season. It was tough to watch. It was embarrassing. There were stories galore about, Bobby Higginson. There were jokes. They were the laughingstock of Major League Baseball until Mr. Ilitch took a stand and said, okay, we got to throw some money at it. We got to turn this around.
Yeah, absolutely. And he was also instrumental, from my knowledge, in bringing back Al Kaline to the ball club as a special assistant, Willie Horton, those legends from the 68 World Series championship squad that the Tigers had. And he was a Tigers lifer, a guy that signed as a minor leaguer with the Tigers in the 1950s, always wanted to play for the Tigers, was a dream of his. And then he wanted to own the Tigers, but bought the Red Wings first. The Red Wings got their ship turned around faster, and it wasn't always good with the Wings, though, either. It wasn't always good with the Tigers, as you noted, too. And this guy started as a businessman, door-to-door salesman. That's how he started. He had the initiative, the assertiveness to go door-to-door to make sales. Then he started his first Little Caesars pizza franchise, which is now, it's made him into a pizza icon. He is that throughout the nation, with many Little Caesars locations throughout the nations. He had one for veterans as well. A Little Caesars started for that, for the less fortunate, I believe, as well, in the inner city of Detroit. So he was very helpful, very giving. He once paid for Rosa Parks, I think for her rent towards the end of her life. I mean, quite the man, quite the legacy that he leaves behind as a man, not just a Tigers or Red Wings owner or as a founder and CEO of Little Caesars Pizza, but also as a man. What seemed to be a very giving man. And for that, he will always be remembered, and perhaps as the best Detroit professional sports team owner, Doc, of all time. And then because he owned more than one team, owning two as well. And the thing that these guys like Dombrowski and Leland have remarked about Ilitch is that they're brokenhearted. Specifically, Leland said that much to Anthony Fennick of the Detroit Free Press. Fennick wrote a piece about it, about Leland's final remarks about Mike Ilitch. He said that he's brokenhearted over the fact that they never brought home a World Series crown to Motown when Ilitch was the owner, a thing that he had dreamed of. Ilitch wanted to accomplish, something that the Tigers of the franchise wanted to accomplish before his passing, didn't have it happening, and maybe now they'll do it out of respect for Mr., out of just his memory, in 2017. Maybe that's what will help them get to the top this year in 2017, playing in his memory, Doc, this year. But anyways, I'll let you comment now on Dombrowski and Leland and Ilitch.
But do you remember the crappy Tigers before? I know you're a young cat, but do you remember the crappy Tigers and the come up with Pudge Rodriguez? Around 2006, you would have been like 14 years old, just becoming a teenager.
Well, I went to all the games a lot more, actually, when my dad had season tickets during those very poor seasons, like 03 and before that. So I saw many bad baseball games, trust me.
What was it like?
It was something else because you could travel around the ballpark and sit wherever you wanted. So it was actually much better at times in terms of that because you could sit wherever you wanted. And my dad actually liked watching the games more because of the fact there was no pressure on the Tigers because nobody expected them to win ever. From the late days of Tiger Stadium until the early days of Comerica Park, really up until 06, because they weren't good until 06 in my lifetime. From 93 to 05, Tigers were miserable, despondent, lackluster, and irrelevant, extremely irrelevant. And really, as you said, as you defined them, Doc, a laughingstock in all of Major League Baseball and in all of professional sports. They were truly the Detroit Lions or Cleveland Browns of Major League Baseball for a long, long time there in the 90s and early 2000s. And then Ilitch made the investment in Dave Dombrowski, and he had Dombrowski pay for Pudge Rodriguez as a free agent, Magglio Ordonez as a free agent. Bringing those guys on board really catapulted the Tigers to new ways of winning, beginning in 06 with Jim Leland as a skipper too, Doc.
Where were your original seats with your dad? Where in Comerica Park were your assigned seats?
Section 300 something, so high up, so they weren't extremely expensive. Now if you try to pay for those tickets and get 4 people to sit in those seats, a lot more money, because my mom went with us too. It was all 4 of us in my family.
In Section 300, in Comerica Park, there are a lot of good seats within the first 5 or 10 rows because I take my nephew to about 5 or 6 games a year. And, around the time of when I want to purchase tickets, I kind of look for the prices. And you can get a decent ticket between $20 and $25 to sit in the first 5 rows in the upper deck. And you got good sight lines. You could see everything. You can see the pictures. You can, really get involved in the game. So I really enjoy going to Comerica Park. And the good thing is, like you said, I remember, and I've shared this story before, when the Tigers were awful, you could sit basically in the entire outfield by yourself. And you remember the story I told you where the usher was trying to, garner my tickets when I was me and a friend were the only person in the entire section. I said, look around, there's nobody here. And it's an opportunity to go to a nice ballpark. And you got to remember, too, it is a lasting legacy for Mike Ilitch and the family to build Comerica Park. You got to remember, people were a little bit disappointed that Tiger Stadium was going to go away. There was a little bit of rumblings as to what to do with that old stadium, but once Comerica Park was built, it was nice, it was classy, and it was something where you needed a good baseball team in that ballpark, and it just took a long time, but even though Pudge Rodriguez was past his prime, he was able to do some things to revitalize. And for people that don't know, that contract that Pudge Rodriguez earned was able to kind of change perception of the Tigers, because you got to remember that Major League Baseball players are in constant communication with one another. So if an organization's not doling out money, if an organization is not willing to spend and be part of an overwhelming drive to earn a championship, people talk. And once Pudge was signed, he was able to go out there and really state to everybody, hey, this organization is for real. And you were able to then, because of tough seasons, you were able to draft a Justin Verlander. You were able to add pieces, and that 2006 team was a special team. But in anything, and what we're seeing now in the world of Detroit sports, there just isn't that great of management. When you've got the final piece, when you brought Jim Leyland here, it was a culmination of like, okay, we're ready to go. Let's make it happen. And it is a little bit disappointing. Many people are talking about it, that it was disappointing that the Tigers were not able to, in 2 trips to the World Series, give Mr. I that elusive World Series before he passed away.
And you know what? The Tigers were good enough. He spent more than enough money, did all that he could to put talent on the field to win a World Series crown. So it wasn't on Mr. I, wasn't on Dave Dombrowski. It was on sometimes a lack of luck and a lack of performance when it counted the most in the postseason, in crunch time, in those postseason ball games.
Now, Vito, to be critical, not too critical, but to look at it, look what a team that became a dynasty was able to do, the New York Yankees. They were able to also home grow a lot of talent. Yes, they are a major market. Yes, they print money with their Yes Network. But Mariano Rivera, Derek Jeter, O'Neill, they were able to develop young players as well as a combination. I know O'Neill was a free agent signing, but in totality, the New York Yankees were able to develop a lot of young players that came up as well. So many people, when you now look at it, I don't think are talking about it, but I know you and I maybe have started to look at it. When you start to look back a little bit on the last 10 years of Tigers baseball, they tried to buy a championship. And you look at it, you go, you know what? If they were to do it over again, yes, the signing of Pudge Rodriguez was good, but maybe you don't hand out some of these big-time contracts around the time of 2010, 2011. I know you made a run in 2012, but look what's happened as a result after that. You've had a struggle now. And for long-term success, I think what the Tigers sacrificed in order to have that run was their minor league system. So now we're seeing the effects of that. You don't have a minor league system that many people talk about. You don't have that many players ranked in the top 50 at all across Major League Baseball. So the Tigers, when you look at it, tried to buy a championship with money. That might have been a mistake instead of maybe investing more in a minor league system. But that's what Dave Dombrowski is known for. He's known for shipping off talent for guys that produce. And right now, only Andrew Miller is the only named player that you think of right now that's really gone on and had major success. So it's not, I know you probably come back and say, well, when he traded all these pieces, there weren't that many. He basically stole Miguel Cabrera. He added pieces by giving away prospects. But what Dombrowski failed to do was in the draft really replenish the minor league system, because once somebody became of note, he tried to ship them away as soon as possible to help the major league club. And we're suffering now, but in the end, I would say that they maybe need to do a better job of that balance between keeping a couple prospects, AA, AAA, that can come in and do the job versus going out there and maybe buying a World Series because it didn't work out.
Well, look at what these other teams are doing now, like the Yankees now, who are like a new mindset Yankees ball club that was not existent back then. Even though they had the core four, they really bought championships as well. So you were talking about those youngsters of the Yankees that they had come up within their farm system. They labeled those guys as the core four. Jeter, Posada, Rivera, and Andy Pettitte. Those guys were the core four of the Yankees, of those championship squads in the mid-90s with Joe Torre as the skipper. But my other point here is that the Yankees now, this new mindset of a new analytical farm system grown approach, is that you're seeing them stack their lineup, rotation pen with youngsters from their farm instead of paying for free agents. They're doing that first and then paying for the expensive free agents. The Cubbies have followed that model as well. So maybe the Tigers could have built a better farm system first, stacked their major league roster with those youngsters from within, from their farm system, and then gone out and paid for the high or top tier free agents. Maybe they could have followed that approach, and maybe they would have actually come through with the World Series title in Mike Ilitch's time as owner. And the question
is it sacrilegious to kind of look back and maybe be a little bit skeptical? Now, it was a great time.
Well, I wouldn't blame him, though, for all that. I would blame the GM. The GM's really making the call. They're just going to report to the owner. They're just saying, hey, Mike, can I do this? And Ilitch had some orders at times to pay for free agents. I know that, like Prince Fielder. But the thing is, truly, Dombrowski was a man calling the shots, as he should be. He's the guy with the baseball acumen. Ilitch, what does he really know? I know he played baseball in the 1950s, maybe the most knowledgeable sports owner the city of Detroit and professional sports teams has ever had because he did play baseball and now, ended up owning a baseball team in the Tigers. Thing is, I still think it comes down to a lot of times to that GM calling the shots, as in Dave Dombrowski when he was doing it, and now Al Avila for the Tigers.
It was a little bit unusual to kind of see, Dave Dombrowski comment, being that he was let go unceremoniously, but they had a great working relationship. In totality, you could say that Mike Ilitch had an unwavering attempt and drive to try and want to win. But as we sit now, he didn't earn his World Series, and unfortunately he passed away. And now we're looking at what's going on as a result of all the selling of the minor league prospects. You got a team that's basically the same in 2017 as it was in 2016. So what's your favorite memory of the last 10, 15 years of the Detroit Tigers? Was it getting to the World Series in 2006? Was it the 2012 World Series? Was it some of the great series versus the Yankees, the Red Sox? The opportunities to get to the World Series in the AL Championship Series. What's been a couple memories that you look back on fondly in the last, 10, 15 years?
I would say in 2006 being 40 games above 500 at one point in the regular season.
40 games.
They were like 75-35 or 76-36 and still wasted away the division lead and had it going as a wild card. But they only lost one playoff game leading up to the World Series. That is also very memorable for me. And then having to play the Cardinals, Leland's buddy, and Tony La Russa, who gave Leland a job with the Chicago White Sox back in the day. That was cool to see those two going head-to-head. And that also on the line in that World Series was going to be the next manager after Sparky Anderson to win a World Series in both leagues. It would have been Leland if La Russa didn't win with the Cardinals in 2006. And because of all the despair, hopelessness the Tigers had leading up to 2006, with me in my lifetime as a Tigers fan, that 2006 campaign and World Series trip will never be forgotten by me forever. So that's my biggest memory, my most fond memory of the Tigers with Ilitch as the owner. Probably my most despondent or hateful memory is the fact that they blew that Game 2 in the ALCS of 2013 against the Bo Sox when Big Papi hit that home run that just cleared Torrey Hunter's glove in right field when Hunter misplayed it, should have had it. I know he regrets it now, and that was their best shot still. I'll say it until my deathbed. I will say that 2013, well, as of right now, in my 23 years of life on this planet Earth that is, I would say 2013 was the best chance for the Tigers to win a fall classic. That's my opinion. I don't know if you share it, Doc, and we've kind of talked about it ad nauseum at times too.
Do you remember that text I sent you during the special that we watched? Oh my gosh, she's reflecting, and just a quick review of that special. I enjoyed it thoroughly. It was very detailed. Bob Costas is a masterful interviewer.
Yeah, he is.
He allows you to kind of get a sense of what the person, the subject that he's interviewing wants to talk about. But it just kind of stunk because it really focused heavily on his time in Pittsburgh, on his time in Colorado, and it kind of just glossed over his time with Detroit. And though the part that really upset me in looking at that piece was Bob Costas is recalling the epic inning where, David Ortiz tied the game, and he comes in and he's like, and they pan to Phil Koch. You had Phil Koch in the bullpen, and he had some success versus David Ortiz. What made you stick with Benoit? And I'm sitting there going, are you kidding me right now? Benoit or Phil Koch, that was your bullpen that you were trying to utilize and analyze, going between those two guys. If I was Jim Leland, I just would have said, you know what? Koch, Benoit, I was screwed either way.
Yeah, F me either way, right? And F-Bit just used whoever I'm feeling that night, and he felt Benoit was a better, more reliable guy to use. And he was a closer down the stretch. Drew Smiley was a very reliable setup man. Do you remember that? Smiley was used out of the pen in 2013, and that duo at the back end of games was very solid, Doc. People forget about that, but Benoit, once he became the closer, was very solid in that ninth inning role. So I liked what he did all year long, Benoit. I thought he was deserving of that role to go out there and try to get out David Ortiz in that big moment in Game 2 of the 2013 ALCS. So I don't doubt or blame, I don't blame Jim Leyland for one moment about him using Benoit over Phil Koch. Now, there is this, though, about Phil Koch. Do you remember in 2012 beating the Yankees to get to the Fall Classic, Doc? Do you remember that? When they made the World Series against the Giants, who they used as the closer in the 2012 postseason to get them to the Fall Classic? What's the name of that guy that was used?
Who was it?
You just named him earlier.
Phil Koch?
Yeah, so I mean, there is that evidence of Phil Koch being kind of superb, actually, in the playoffs. Now, that was in the playoff setting and not in any other regular season setting, really any other setting in his playoff experience that I can recall. So he still wasn't the most reliable guy to use in 2013, but Leyland did have that evidence in his, backhand or back of his mind that, hey, Koch was used and was reliable in 2012 when I used him as my closer. So, hey, there was that option. And Ortiz, as a lefty, you might have thought, hey, why not use Phil Koch, who, at least at that point, still was an experienced left-handed specialist. But are we going to really doubt Leyland at this point for using Benoit over Phil Koch? No. We don't want to even relive that memory. Who does? I don't, as a Tigers fan. I remember still, Doc, to this day, I turned off the game. That game, too, because I thought it was over. I thought the Tigers had it in the bag. I turned it on, bases were loaded. Then I had to see that David Ortiz hit that grand slam. That was miserable.
But overall, I would give that piece a B. I feel like they should have used the rant. I mean, literally, that rant after that early season, series really set the pace for the Detroit Tigers.
In 06, you're saying?
Yeah, they should have found that and played it and said, hey, you were able to. I really feel like Costas left the storyline on the table. He could have really brought up the fact that, hey, you had this, misfits, you had this group of guys, and you were able to kind of motivate them with one single speech and really set the course for that season. They didn't go that way. They just kind of talked about the disappointment regarding the couple World Series and things like that, and they kind of just glossed over it. It wasn't even a 12-minute segment. It wasn't that much of time talking about the Detroit Tigers era, and it left me disappointed, and I messaged you along the way. I just thought that they could have did a lot more in that segment.
It just made me cry more and more. It did. And we don't want to keep crying. We have spring training now. So when we get back from this commercial break, we'll talk about spring training news and notes with pitchers and catchers having reported this past Monday. We'll be right back after this break.
Doc here for the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. Thank you for your continued support and allowing us to keep the studio lights on, the microphones hot here at the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. If you like what you're listening to, you like the variety of podcasts that you hear, definitely check out our website, DetroitSportsPodcast.com. That's the easiest way to support us. You get all the news from the network. You can check out the work from Vito, myself, all the guys that are putting out great content almost each and every day. And hey, if you're prone to shop online, click through that Amazon banner, go about your business, shop, and then when you're on that Amazon page, just bookmark it. Anytime at all that you make an online purchase, it kicks us back a little something and helps us keep this project going. We've been going strong since 2013, and that's been largely due to the support of our supporters, and we greatly appreciate it. DetroitSportsPodcast.com.
And back here on the latest episode of Tigers Talk of Chirco and Company, as pitchers and catchers now, Doc, we are excited to say have reported to spring training camp in Lakeland, Florida. Always exciting to say that much, and not as beautiful weather here in Michigan, but beautiful weather there, probably, right? And Lakeland will be in Lakeland, Florida, as the Tigers are there. And you know what? Pitchers, I think the Tigers will be all right in the rotation. So, gotta put my foot on the pedal, on the brakes when it comes to the bullpen, though. Doc, I think we have to do that.
Yeah, we do. We have to look at it, and we have to be straight up honest that they had started down the path of a rebuild, but it just didn't go that way because maybe they're looking at it like, okay, we got one more chance at it. Let's just hold off and let's wait and see what we can do with this group of talent one more time. But do you hear the storyline now coming out since the passing of Mike Ilitch? I want to get your opinion on it because I'm not exactly sure how to feel about it because I know it's sentimental. I know what they're trying to do, but I'm not sure how it's hitting me just yet. And maybe from your reaction, maybe I can really solidify mine. But do you like or respect the fact that maybe the theme of the 2017 Tigers will be win one for Mr. I? It just seems like, you know what? I don't think you should have waited till he died to really put forth a slogan. I know they tried their hardest. It just seemed like certain situations they fell short with the bullpen, with the right talent, maybe with contracts. But do you like the slogan potentially? And Brad Ausmus came out and said it, that he hopes his team is able to use that as a rallying cry to maybe get over that hump. Do you think a team like that needs it? Do you think it should be used as a rallying cry? It just seems to me like I'm not exactly sure how to feel about it, because I know in sports you need to find motivation. I'm just not sure how I feel about that being used as a motivation for 2017.
Well, the players should be motivated enough by their salaries that they make, which are ludicrous, contracts at times that they do make. But it would be in honor of Mr. I, who owned the Tigers since 1992, a guy that wanted to see the Tigers win in his lifetime, never did as club owner. So for me, why not go out with the bang in honor of him in 2017 and win it all? I want to see the team win it all, too. I mean, if that's your rallying cry, why is that a bad rallying cry? I don't think it is, Doc. I think it's all right to be sentimental here. And I think to root on the Tigers on behalf of Mr. I and his honor, and honor of his legacy specifically as a Detroit businessman, helping out the city of Detroit, but also the Tigers as their team owner since 1992. I think the Tigers, well, the fans want to see the Tigers win because of that. I know I do, because of Mr. I. Also, I think the Tigers players truly do want to win because of him, and they might be even more personally motivated on a player-by-player basis to win it all in 2017 because of him. Thing is, though, if they were talented enough, good enough in the past, they would have already won too, and they didn't because of flaws in the bullpen. Those bullpen flaws are still there, probably going to hold the Tigers back from winning it all in 2017. So will they actually win it all in honor of Mike Ilitch and his great legacy with the Tigers, with the city of Detroit, the state of Michigan? Probably not. It's probably not going to happen, Doc. Sad but true, because right now, as we've slated them before, they're about a middle-of-the-pack team in the American League, maybe the second-place team or third-place team in the AL Central. Now, Pacoda projections projected the Twins to finish ahead of the Tigers because of their heavy-duty hitting. The Tigers now have a huge hole, by the way, also in center field. And they're going to need some guys to take some jumps this year in offensive production, such as Upton in the first half, a youngster still, and James McCann. He has to be better offensively, too, from the get-go. So they need a lot to go right, and I think, once again, I've beaten a dead horse here, but they need too much to go right, I think, to get all the way to the Fall Classic this year. But let me tell you this much. If they do, it definitely is in honor of Mr. I, and it would be a great thing to him, and I think to the Ilitch family. The Tigers can pull it off. And I got to believe what will be happening soon, if it wasn't already announced, is that they will be wearing a patch all season long on their uniforms in honor of Mr. I. Would imagine that will be coming to fruition very soon here, too.
Okay. No.
So your stance is that you don't like it, you don't want to hold the sentimental value and say that's the reason why the Tigers should go all out to win, and if they do win, that they're honoring him?
Maybe publicly. Maybe behind the scenes as an organization, I think that obviously many people would assume that that's going to be the rallying cry. I would say maybe you just want to keep that in-house. That's probably my stance
why is
on
that?
it.
Isn't that a great thing, though, to the family, to the Ilitch family, to say that, hey, we're trying to win for Mr. I?
But then if you look at it, why didn't they go all out in 2016 when they finished short? I mean, that last series, you don't think that was enough to get you over that hump versus Atlanta to score some runs instead of striking out?
And they knew he was sick, and it comes down to talent, production on the field. You really, as much as you want to do something, it's not all controllable, You can't just do something well because, hey, I'm doing it for this guy. It doesn't work that way. It really doesn't.
Lynn Henning of the Detroit News wrote an article, and his thesis is that it's going to come down to the pitching. And he noted that the Tigers were 28th in ERA in 2015, and they finished 74 and 87. They were 20th in ERA in 2016 and won 13 more games. Do you agree with the notion that, if the Tigers' team ERA is lowered and the defense improves significantly, that this team could potentially, let's say they get in the top 10 in ERA or maybe top 15, that maybe they win an extra 10 games, that may help propel them into the postseason, because it's going to be between the Tigers, I believe, and the Cleveland Indians. And if you can just get a solid pitching rotation that does stay healthy, and you play better defense in the outfield and better team defense, limit runs, I do believe you have a chance to be in that conversation. Do you agree with that notion that let's start looking at the pitching more of an emphasis than maybe the offense?
Well, they won 86 games last year. If they win 10 more games, they're going to win the division. Thing is, right now, I see a large separation between the Tigers and the Tribe. I think the Cleveland Indians will win the division handsomely without very much trouble. because I see a significant gap between the two clubs, and I see the Indians as maybe World Series favorites in the American League right now after signing Edwin Encarnacion, getting back Michael Brantley, that young, great rotation, 1 through 5 for them. I see that all going and working in their favor to allow them to potentially return to the Fall Classic. They have positioned themselves at least for that run back to the Fall Classic. And the thing is, the Tigers aren't in position to make a Fall Classic run. Now, the two of the keys in the rotation are Jordan Zimmerman being healthy and productive. Also, Daniel Norris. I think those are the two keys to success for the Tigers as a whole. Those two guys getting it done in the rotation every fifth day. If Norris is as good as I think he could be, and I think he will be eventually, but right away in 2017 and for the entirety of the season, meaning he stays healthy more than not, Zimmerman, same thing. If he's more productive and is more healthy than not, I see this Tigers team being pretty darn successful. But then it still comes down to the woes in the bullpen, a very porous bullpen.
See, today you're getting a skeptical, Doc, as I vary back and forth week to week. Sometimes it's positive, Doc. This week is a little bit of a skeptical, Doc, in that I know we tend to value our pitchers, and I know we tend to value the people that we have on our team. And sometimes I look at it as you were talking, I said, we're relying on Fulmer, Norris, and Boyd like they're the second coming of, Glavine, Smoltz, and Avery there in Atlanta. It's one of those things where I get it. Those are the guys that are going to be looked upon to propel the Tigers, but you got to remember, they're young, and look what happened last year. Daniel Norris, you got to remember, he had health problems, was up and down, and there were some starts where he was unbelievable, would get guys out, but there were other starts where, if you look at his numbers, he got rocked. You look at Boyd, similar situation, in that there were some outings where you look like, oh my gosh, this guy looks like Tom Glavine. This guy can get guys out. This guy can really be a stud in this rotation. But then other starts came through and couldn't get out of the first or second inning, high pitch count, couldn't find the strike zone, gave up a couple key hits in tough situations. So I'm sitting here today going, I understand they need to take a step, but I'm thinking that the step that we're all hoping they take, they don't reach. I think they do get better. Fulmer, Norris, and Boyd will take a step, but I don't think they'll take the step that everybody's thinking to really help this team not only get to the postseason, because getting to the postseason is nice, but to compete. I don't see, a Corey Kluber versus Boyd matchup going that well, if that is how it shakes out. Now, if they prove that they can pitch and be consistent, then you have the making of a rotation with 5 arms that you could go to bat with. It's just right now, I know people want that, and that is the talking point, but just based upon what I've seen visually, it's tough to believe it's going to happen.
But I think Norris can be better and will be better. That's my bold prediction. Will be better than last year and better than Michael Fulmer and the Tigers rotation every fifth day. That is my bold prediction for the Tigers right now, at least in their rotation. And then Zimmerman is key, and not having to start Sanchez and Pelfrey, the Pelf-Sanch, or whatever you want to, however you want to, combine those two names there. I think those two guys, not allowing them to start too many times in 2017 is another key to the Tigers being successful in the rotation 1 through 5 on a consistent basis all throughout the season, because you can't afford to have them start as many times as last year. If you do, you're going to suffer a lot of pain, a lot of losing, and more than the Tigers should if they have Matt Boyd starting more often, even more often than last year. Norris, same thing, if he's healthy, Fulmer and Verlander. So I see a very solid 1 through 3 from Verlander to Fulmer to Norris, and Zimmerman really is still maybe considered the number 2 or number 3 right behind Fulmer. But I see actually Norris being better than Zimmerman. I think Norris is this long-term potential ace-caliber arm that the Tigers can feature year in, year out. I think he's really that good, Daniel Norris. And I think he will be better in 2017 even, better than Michael Fulmer. That's my bold prediction once again. But if Fulmer, I see him taking a little bit of a step back because of a sophomore regression. I still see him being solid. Maybe not as good, but solid. So if he's solid, Norris is better than last year. And let's say better than what Fulmer will give the Tigers on an every fifth day basis in 2017. That's a very solid 1 through 3. And then once again, it falls back to Jordan Zimmerman. What are you going to get out of him? And you get something of quality, of worth out of him every fifth day. You've got a very solid 1 through 4 in that Tigers rotation that can compete, maybe not with the Indians, but with the likes of other ball clubs in the American League enough to get into the playoffs via the wild card. So I still think that is an option for the Tigers, getting in via the wild card. And once you get in, because that's all I care about, all that Tigers fans should care about, is getting in to the playoffs. Because once you get in, anything can happen. And we've seen that year in, year out with the Major League Baseball postseason. Big time, Doc.
Okay, Daniel Norris, that is a little bit bold. No doubt about it. And stick with us to the end of this podcast where I'll give my bold prediction. But spring training, the pitchers and catchers reported earlier this week. The full squad's going to start working out towards the weekend. And then, the train starts rolling. They play Florida Southern, and then they go out and they start Grapefruit League action. You can go check out our website, DetroitSportsPodcast.com. All the key dates that you need to know about regarding spring training will be there. Look to Vito's Twitter page at Vito Jerome, and you can find out the latest news and notes because this guy here, Vito, loves him some baseball. And this Tigers Talk podcast has been rolling on since the offseason, and all the news and notes you can find here on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. So I'm proud of you. I look for more expansive coverage, some more in-depth knowledge from you this year as you progress into your, I think, now third season covering the Tigers with the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
We started in 2015, midway through the season, a dismal season. So we had to deal with that, the second half of that horrible campaign. Then we had 2016, all of last year, all of this offseason as well. And now we're going into spring training with the Tigers, and we're trying to do our best to stay optimistic about the outlook of the both of us for the Tigers in this upcoming season. I think it could be better than some people think, but I don't think it will be a great campaign. I will actually reveal my legitimate or ultimate prediction for how many wins they finish with at some point as well throughout spring training this year. But that'll happen later on a future edition because that's all she wrote for episode number 78. Now, you said you had a bold prediction, right? Is that for this week or next week, Doc?
Here's my bold prediction. Dang, man, you wrapped this up. I wanted to blow you a little bit more, but I get it. We got a strict time limit here. Thank you for respecting that.
For once, right?
Once the news of Mike Ilitch's passing hit, kind of the speculation was, okay, let the shit show begin because maybe Mr. Ilitch, Mr. Chris Ilitch is going to sell the Detroit Tigers. And I know that maybe people are going to start speculating that it's going to be Goris or somebody else. When you look at the valuation of the Tigers, $1.5 billion, my goodness. And I think people are saying that the sale of the Marlins might kind of set the price range for the Detroit Tigers. But my bold prediction is Mr. Chris Ilitch is not going to sell the Detroit Tigers. And within the next 10 years, he will have a World Series trophy. I think that he's going to learn from his dad's mistake. And once something like this happens, when you lose a parent, obviously you get sad, but then you get that renewed hope, that renewed spirit. First step is he'll ride out this season with Avila and Brad Ausmus. Maybe he'll see the error of his ways, blow them out, fire them both, start anew in 2018, and then go from there, get top quality upper management, and then start the rebuilding process. And in the next 5 to 10 years, Mr. Chris Ilitch will deliver on the promise and the hopes of his dad. He will hold up, probably by the time he's 58 years old, in 7 seasons, 1 World Series title.
Okay, yeah, Dan Gilbert will in 7 or 8 years. Dan Gilbert will be doing that as Tigers owner, I think, in 7 or 8 years.
Gilbert, not Goris? Not Goris?
I think maybe a combination of the two. I've heard that, a little rumbling of that, maybe them going in on the Tigers ownership if Chris Ilitch does intend on selling.
So if you're Chris Ilitch, do you sell the Detroit Tigers?
Yeah, I don't care about baseball. He doesn't care about baseball. He cares about the Wings, and that's it. Wants one franchise. Maybe not even either franchise. I've heard that now. Speculation coming out recently since Mr. I passed away. That is Mike Ilitch. So Chris Ilitch maybe selling both franchises? And how about even the Little Caesars franchise? What if he sells everything and just makes bank and just sits on that the rest of his life, or uses all that money that he does earn from those sellings to invest in something else, something that maybe he has an interest in? It could be that, because you never know. When a son or daughter takes over for his mom or dad, doesn't mean that they're going to just keep ownership of the club, of the organization, company, small or large. So it could be where he wants to make his own path now, right? It could be that with Chris Ilitch. And we will just have to wait and see, as we'll talk about that ad nauseum, I project on future editions of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company. Doc, gracias for all your time. And thank you to all of you out there listening in to episode 78 of Tigers Talk. We're signing off for now. Enjoy this first week of spring training. And we'll be back for next week's episode of Tigers Talk, episode 79 of Tigers Talk. Guys, God bless. Bye-bye.